Hi, I'm Tim Kilduff, and this is Business Matters. Business Matters showcases the people who run businesses at Hopkinton. It's an HCAM program that really focuses on not just the businesses in town, but the people who run them and the passion that they bring to their particular jobs. I think we've got a difficult interview this time, because we're going to be talking to Peter Mezid, who's the president of Weston Nurseries. And I think it's difficult, Peter, because not only do we want to talk about what it's like to run this iconic company, and it is in Hopkinton, but I think we got to talk a little bit about the history. I mean, you were born into something pretty special, weren't you?
Yeah, and I'm the oldest child in my generation of my siblings, and you know, from a very young age, working out in the fields back then, I was able to find out how special it was, and I've always felt kind of obligated to carry on and be a steward for the business.
What, when you say special, it wasn't always in Hopkinton, right? The business was. Talk a little
Correct.
bit about that history.
So the name,
I think we underestimate this.
Right. Weston Nurseries was in the town of Weston, and it was located right where there's this turnpike maintenance building about 2 miles west of the 128 interchange.
I know where it is.
Right there is where the center of the nursery was. And it started in 1923, I think it was on Winter Street in Weston. And it got up to about 200 acres, mostly field growing, some container growing as well. Nice flat land, and when they announced they were going to build the turnpike, we knew with plenty of advance that we'd have to move someday. They took that land over that we were operating on by eminent domain. So the nursery, anticipating that, started to buy out property in Hopkinton. And back then there was, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 people out here, and still cows. So a lot of farms too. So the land was cheap, and they bought parcel after parcel through the decades. And a lot of it was wooded area, and these were tough people who had to clear the land and the rocks and everything that existed in the hills and the cold weather and all that. But it got up to about close to 1,000 acres, with the last parcel being purchased in the late 80s.
So when you were a young guy, right, just growing up, was the family just immersed in this business?
Yeah, my my dad and my uncle ran it, and I knew my grandfather well too, and I saw him run it, and they lived and breathed it. Every family vacation I took as a kid was centered around a national nurseryman's conference. It was good. We got to go to some pretty extravagant places sometimes, but they didn't take a trip without our industry and our work being part of the trip, the basis for the trip. So, you know, I watched my dad, my uncle, and my grandfather work extremely hard and be extremely dedicated, and they were particularly interested in the growing aspects of the business, both in the fields and in the containers. And it was a complete nursery operation where we started all our plants from a seed or a cutting, or we did grafting in the wintertime, and it was a huge expense involved with growing when you're starting everything off from a seed or a cutting. You don't sell that plant if it's a shrub or even a tree for 5, 7, 9 years down the road. So, you know, we can get into why the business has changed so much, but that just became something we couldn't afford to do in this part of the country and compete effectively.
I think we do. I think we do need to talk a little bit about how the business has changed. But I'm interested in how you're now running the company. You're the president. Mm-hmm. I think everybody would assume that you went to college and you studied horticulture. Are we right?
You're wrong. You're wrong. My dad didn't either. So I think my dad and I both went to schools that offered that, thinking we would do that. We both ended up in the business schools. My dad went to Cornell. I went to Syracuse. And like I said, the reason I went to Syracuse is because they had the School of Environmental Science and Forestry, right. And I thought I might want to go that way. As a senior in high school, you don't always know what you want to do. I didn't even know I was going to work at the nursery at that point, eventually. So ended up staying in the business school, and I feel that was a great decision, because growing up, starting, you know, working in the nursery at such a young age, I really, really was interested and really absorbed a lot along the way. And the best thing to do is to learn by doing, and reading the names of the plants and looking at those plants as they progress and grow, and knowing a lot about them because of that. how they grow, what goes wrong with them, where they do well, where they don't do well. And there's a fair amount of us in this industry who went about things that way without going to school for it. And when you're running a business like I am now, it's most important to make sure the business does well. And there are plenty of people out there who are the great technicians, the horticulturists, the people who know soils, the entomologists who know bugs, and botanists and horticulturists. So these are the people that we rely on to run the business.
But you had to, you said you picked certain things up. Are there standards or licenses in your business that you had to get?
Well, it's funny because I feel I know a lot. Just last year I took my MCH, Massachusetts Certified Horticulturist exam, and I was pretty nervous. I hadn't taken a test since college, really. It's been years, decades. And everybody was watching me. I better pass this test. Everyone knew I was going to take it. And
was it when you say everyone?
I did pass.
When you say everyone, who's everyone?
Well, my employees, what I did was I challenged everybody to become an MCH because that just gives you more credentials. And they said, well, what about you? And I said, you're right, I got to do it. And the MCH, Mass Certified Horticulturist exam, is not an easy one. Half the people don't pass it the first time. You have to identify plants. I took it in the winter, so you have to identify branches and what they are with no leaves on there, and you have to really know what you're looking at, and that's half the test, and then the other half is 135 questions, multiple choice. You have to pass both parts of that. So I did very well, actually. I got in the 90s, mid-90s on both.
Wow.
But I studied a lot. I wanted to make sure I passed.
So does this translate, this approach and then in test taking and the track that you took, does it translate, because you have kids that are in Hopkins schools. Have they started talking to you about the business?
Yeah, not really. Just like I wasn't pushed by my parents to go into it, kind of knew I always would.
Right.
I didn't go into it, by the way. I went 7 years and did other things and made all my mistakes before I came into it, which is good advice for anybody in a family business. But I want to see my kids not have that pressure. I want to see my kids kind of go somewhere else, even if they do think they'll come back someday into the business. And there's no telling now. I have a junior son, a sophomore daughter, and a daughter in 7th grade. So it's a little young, a little early to see what's going to happen with the 5th generation of the business. And if nobody's interested, maybe there's somebody else in the family, or maybe it's a non-family member that takes the ball and runs with it in the next generation.
It's hard not to talk to you about Hopkinton and what you've seen. When you were in high school, there would be what? How many people in Hopkinton? Roughly.
Half what there are today. 7,000 to 8,000 total. Half the households, half the amount of people. I think when I graduated in 1985.
So you've seen really a major transition in your business in that niche. You've also lived through some pretty substantial changes in the community. But let's talk a little bit about the business. When you started, when you got interested, there weren't these big box stores, I assume, all over the place.
Right.
Which has got to be some change. In the focus. The focus on the business at that point, in what you grew up with, you have already said you started things from seed.
Yeah.
That probably doesn't happen anymore, does it?
We had a very good brand name, and we still have that.
Right.
The box stores on the retail level came in the 80s, but also on the wholesale level, which a big part of our business is re-wholesale to the trade, to landscape companies buying from us. That changed too with more of a global plant movement developing. Plants all of a sudden, re-wholesale yards all of a sudden started opening up, and they brought plants in from Oregon and from North Carolina. So what happened is, on the re-wholesale level, what happened was you saw these re-wholesale yards buying the best plants from the best growers at growing those plants. And we didn't buy anything in from the outside. We sold whatever we grew. This is in the 80s and most of the 90s. We really didn't get to buying in plants until the new century. And then the box stores opened up too. The box stores, even though there's probably 30 of them within 20 miles of us now, haven't really impacted our business because what we do is so much different than what they do. They have small plants, we have big plants. We deliver those big plants, we install those plants, we have the knowledge about those plants. We know we have to be competitive with them. And this has taken some time to really figure out how we fit in. But today we sell a lot of hard goods, bagged fertilizer, grass seeds, soils, and we're very price competitive. The perception is we're more expensive, But I'll tell you what, you go into Home Depot and buy anything, they ain't always cheap. But that perception is the reality for the consumer, and we know we got to make sure we're always within check on pricing. But again, the plants are so much different. They're often plants that you can't even compare because we're the only ones that have them, whether it be a variety or a size. And back to the wholesale thing, we went on years growing and growing and growing, and we finally switched over to more of a buy-sell business model that we're in today, and you had to do it. You just couldn't sustain starting from a seed and 9 years later selling a tree in this climate, with rocky soils and hills and expensive labor. It took that plant 3 more years than somebody who's growing it on river bottom soil in Connecticut or Cumberland County, New Jersey. This is where we buy a lot of plants in from these days. So the business had to change, and we had to get out of being a grow, sell, production-driven business model that my dad and my uncle really enjoyed to more of a buy-sell. And we still do some growing, but it's only where it makes sense. It's an unusual tree that you can't buy in, and if you could, it would cost you a fortune. It's quick to turn perennials that you can start off and sell in a short period of time. Those kind of things make sense to grow.
Well, the little niche, because I keep talking to you about niches, but this whole rhododendron, that was a big deal for for Weston Nurseries.
I'd say more than anything else, that's what's put us on the map and helped us with our brand name recognition. We developed a lot of plants, hundreds of plants, and there were some real winners. My great-grandfather, Peter John Mezett, he has a plant named after him that his son, Ed Mezett, second-generation owner, my grandfather, developed back in the 30s. And it wasn't until they moved to Hopkinton that you have to reproduce this plant through many generations and see how it does before you know it's a good one. Probably 20 years later, after he initially developed it and cross-hybridized it, taking the pollen and making a new plant, essentially. It wasn't 20 years later until they knew they had a winner. And that's when he just saw it on a hillside. And third year in a row, the thing is reliable, it's got great foliage, it survived the tough winters, the flower color is true every year, the flowers are full, bloom period is long. And so that PJM, as he named it after his father, Peter John Mezett, is one of the most popular plants in the country right now.
Really?
It is one of the most widely used and sold plants across the country. That really helped put us on the map. And there were many more that are right behind it that we introduced that are also very good.
When you get up in the morning, and I'm assuming you want to go to work, what
4 out of 5 days.
4 out of 5 days.
5 out of 6 days, and sometimes 6 out of 7 days.
6 out of 7 days? You get 1 day off a week, probably?
In the spring, yeah, not many days off in the spring.
What's exciting? What gets your blood moving in the morning about going to work?
I love business. I love customer service. I love beating customers' expectations. They thought they were coming in for X and they got X plus. I love when we plan on something, we develop a system that we're going to follow, and our staff actually follows that system and it works. And you got to be changing all the time, and we're constantly saying, mostly this, in the off season, in the winter months, we're planning on what we're going to do once the floodgates open and everybody wants to get into their gardens in the spring. So that's what I like. We're actually extremely busy. There's 20 or 30 of us that work year-round in the company, and we're extremely busy in the wintertime figuring out what we have to do to be successful come spring. I like that. I like the business aspects. I also like the buying that we do. We go out, and just got back last week from one of our big trade shows in Baltimore, and you learn so much every time you get out of here and go visit with people, and that's a terrific trade show we go to. I like ideas, but I really thrive on the execution part as well.
But the education, staying abreast with industry trends, has got to occupy some part of your brain, I would think.
Yeah, what's happening in the plant world is there's so many new plants. Instead of a company like Weston Nurseries introducing plants, there are factories that introduce plants, and that's what they do, and they put a royalty on it, and that's how they make money. We never patented or put a royalty on anything we ever introduced. My dad and my grandfather before him insisted on not doing that. But there's so many new plants coming out now, and it's branding. Many of the viewers, I'm sure, will know Proven Winners. That's an example of a brand. You can see it in the box stores, you can see it in the independent garden centers. But that's just a factory that introduces new and better annuals in that case. And there are perennials and shrubs and trees now that are better than the natives or the species that show better bloom time or can tolerate colder climates or have a feature that really is kind of outstanding that no one's ever seen before. So there's so many new plants coming that you do have to decide what you're going to go with and if they're going to work in this area. So we maintain about a 3-acre test garden where we're not the first one to say this is a new plant you got to try. Most of the time, if we're a little uncertain, we want to test that out first, make sure it's going to work for people.
So that's the exciting part. What are some of the challenging things that that you have to manage and deal with?
You know what's tough right now is hiring knowledgeable staff. In our region of the country, the big schools, the land-grant universities, University of Rhode Island, UNH, UMass, the curriculum of horticulture is diminishing. There are fewer professors and fewer students going in. It's not known as a high-paid occupation. In addition to that, when I went through high school, everybody worked at Weston Nurseries, and it was kind of an enjoyable lifestyle for people, and now it's mostly migrant workers, a huge Spanish population that does that kind of work. So you don't see as many local folks getting into it in this part of the country because there's not a lot of growing and horticultural activities. So our workforce is getting older, and there are fewer younger people to pull in from. There are a lot of younger people who know certain aspects. Turf is popular, landscape design and installation is popular, but when it comes to the knowledge of plants and everything about plants, it's tough to find people these days.
The basics, so to speak. I would think the basics.
Right, the basics. That said, there's a lot more information for everybody to learn themselves out there too. So you can learn it quicker. It's on the internet. You can find out anything you want. You know, we used to produce a huge catalog every year. They called it the Bible of the industry.
I remember that.
And in 2003, we stopped. That was the last one we did. And people went nuts, especially the real gardeners around here. But it just didn't make sense for us to spend $150,000 a year to change the cover on a catalog anymore and a few of the listings. So we now have a plant library with a search feature on there with pictures. And we can say if this is available at any given time or not. So that's the way the world works these days. People, you may not have as much knowledge, but people can find out things really easily. What makes you smart is how quickly can you find something out.
So how do you compete with that? I mean, there are other people in the industry probably doing similar things, and how do you compete?
I still say the knowledge is key, and that's why people come to us in particular. And we do a lot of training ourselves on the job. We spend a lot of money sending people to green school or getting their MCH. We pay for all that stuff. So it's a lot of on-the-job training, and you hire for attitude, and you hire for positiveness, and these people want to do that, and they want to be part of a company that supports that. So we take field trips, we do testing, we do training every Thursday morning for an hour. Our whole garden center staff learns about something, whether it's a new plant or a product that kills winter moth, because that's a big problem in this area right now, or hardscaping. We're getting into stone now, so our staff is learning all about manufactured stone. So it goes on and on and on. And I think on-the-job training with the right attitude is what does it for us.
You've born and raised here. You're running a business now. You've seen Hopkinton change a lot. But I bet you it's difficult. I would think it might be a challenge. There are probably people coming to you all the time in terms of contributions to the community and all of that sort of stuff. How do you balance that? Because I think it would be hard, particularly since you were born and raised here.
Our challenge is, I look at Phipps Insurance, great local company, good brand name, been around here forever. They really do a lot for the community. They're always first to donate, for the flyer for the musical or the whatever it is that the Boosters Club is doing, whatever it is. We have to spread that out a little more, so it's difficult. we have rules about what we say yes to, and it has to do with, we have a finite amount of money and we got to spread that out. But we try to support Hopkinton and surrounding towns as much as possible. In fact, we list what we do now on our website so people can see that. But we have to say no sometimes too. So our customer base comes from all over the place. We have people from the North Shore, South Shore, and don't forget we have a Chelmsford location now as well. So, if it's something further away that's not really related to who our customers are or horticulture, we'll tend to say no to those things, but we'll say yes to things that are more garden-oriented and more local to our locations.
You spend time. You're engaged in the community. I'm interested in your impressions on sort of the state of Hopkinton, if you will, and then what your hope and vision for the community might be going forward.
Yeah. I'm not a politician. I don't often take sides on things. I think, this town has a lot of people who care, and I think what the majority is saying these days is good. I think the rural aspects of the community are extremely important, but we all know we need more economic development. We need more commercial tax base, and I think the current town leadership is doing a great job with that. So, as you know, I'm involved with the Chamber of Commerce, and I've been on the Economic Development Commission and contributed, but I kind of just keep an eye on things. I don't really want to be the leader. I think my business takes up way too much time, and I've got kids, so someday when those things change a little bit, I wouldn't mind being a little more involved. I think, it's just so different these days. Our biggest customer type used to be the gardeners. They knew about plants. They wanted to learn more about plants. That's our smallest part of our customer base right now. Now it's people from Hopkinton and surrounding towns who are more the dabblers and decorators. They just, curb appeal is important from an enjoyment standpoint and a retail value standpoint. And just tell me what I need to do is more about what it is. And the husband and wife are too busy to take the time to figure it out. We may see somebody once every 5 years because they want to do a project in their yard. And they'll want to know a little bit, or they'll want to do some of it themselves, but it's mostly tell me what I need to know and do it for me. Figure it out. Yeah.
What about going forward, Peter? What, for yourself, your family, the business that you run? It's Hopkinton's 300th anniversary year.
Yeah, we're doing. I'm behind this Gateway Green project. I think that's.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I think that's an exciting opportunity for the town to really say something about itself. It's the median strip, right when you pull off 495, that we're talking about landscaping next spring, during the 300th anniversary. I think is a good time to do it.
Probably fair to say that's not a very attractive area.
Right now, it's not. No, right. It's just old grass and brown most of the year. So we want to contribute a lot ourselves, and we're trying to get people who own property and who are tenants in that area to pitch in as well to really green that up. So when you come into the town, most people, that's the first impression they get. They say, that's the type of community we're coming in. They take care of things, and it looks nice, and it really helps with doing things like healthy living and reducing crime, and it's good for the environment at the same time. So, going forward, I think this town should be thinking more that way. These kind of things have a ripple effect, and I want to be part of that kind of stuff for sure.
How does that have an impact on crime?
Well, I think if you come into a town that looks shabby, and you're a crook and a bad guy, you take advantage of that sometimes. If you come into a town that looks well kept, you're going to say, they probably have a pretty good police force. Maybe I should get out of here. So I think it makes an impression.
I'm struck by that because I don't think most of us don't think like that. That's a real valuable idea. And as you take that idea and you spread it out with them, nobody thinks about that, but that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I love what I do, and I want to tell people about that kind of stuff because I look at gardening and landscaping as not a nice to have, but a necessity. I mean, we are so disconnected with the work we do in cubicles or in the office most of the time. People need to get out there and touch soil and get dirty, and the kids have kind of lost that these days. They're in playing video games, and we need to remember that this is also you know, it reduces crime, sure, but it's healthy, it's exercise, it's organic local food, it's connecting with your family, it's so many things.
You know, one of the things, there are some of us, and you're included in this group, that might be described as cheerleaders for the community. And I think sometimes when one does it, people look askance and they say, you know, what's all this about? But you clearly are. You clearly are a cheerleader for the community. So if there's one last thing you would say about Hopkinton, if you were out and you need to give an elevator speech about Hopkinton.
Mm-hmm. This is the question you're going to get me on.
Well, yeah. What was it? What was it? What would it be?
It's a great place to live. I mean, we have, by geography, by where we're located, in proximity to Boston and Worcester, you know, with major highways and the rural character of the community, it's where I would choose to live in this state. It's just, you know, you're far enough away where you have some space in your yard, far enough away from the city, and it's always going to be a little more affordable than closer in. And for gardening and outdoor activity, which I value a lot, this is a great community. And we're doing so many great things, and the people really care. And that should continue, because you've got groups like the Chamber who pay attention to that kind of stuff, and you've got business leaders. You
know, one of the frustrations about this little discussion is that it goes really quick. We could do 2 more of these shows and explore the changing nature of your business and so forth, but we've run out of time. Let me say this. I have some difficulty drawing a line here, but you know, having been associated with businesses at Hopkinton, Weston Nurseries is one that I have high regard for, and most people do. So it's really exciting to be able to see someone who's gone off and learned how to run a business helping to continue that tradition. So thanks for spending the time with us.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me.